Hello, 5th grade math students. This is Chapter 4.7, Part 1, our Introduction to Real-World Problems with Multiplication and Division of Fractions. Let's begin with the idea of finding parts of a whole to solve real-world problems. A vendor at a farmer's market has 240 pieces of fruit. She sells half of the fruit to one customer and 1/3 of it to another customer. So first she sells 1/2 to customer A, and 1/3 to customer B. So question A is, how many pieces of fruit does the vendor sell? And question B is, how many pieces of fruit does she have left? Let's begin by using a bar model. First, let's draw a model that represents all 240 pieces of fruit. This bar represents our whole. We're going to sell half of this and 1/3 of this. So somehow we need to divide our whole into parts that can be counted by halves and thirds. We need to look for a common denominator, which will be 6, correct? We could rewrite each of these as an equivalent fraction over 6. So 3/6 and 2/6. And let me divide this into 6 parts. All right, so once again, remember this whole represents 240 pieces of fruit. So what is the value of each portion? We'll solve that by writing this problem. We have 6 units, correct? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yep. Equals 240 pieces of fruit. We want to solve for 1 unit, so we're going to divide each side by 6. 1 unit is going to equal 40 pieces of fruit. All right, so now we can go in here and we can write 40 pieces in each box. Fabulous. So for part A, we know that our vendor sold half, which would be this many. And next our vendor sold 1/3, which would be 2/6. So our vendor sold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/6 of the fruit, or 5 times 40, which equals 200. So question A, how many pieces of fruit did the vendor sell? The answer is 200. Question B, how many pieces of fruit does the vendor have left? The answer is 40. Now let's solve this using a different method. Here's method 2 for solving our same problem. First, our vendor sells 1/2 of the fruit, and then our vendor sells 1/3. Our first step is to make these equivalent fractions. So we're going to have 3/6 and 2/6. We need a common denominator. So the fraction of fruit sold would be 3/6 plus 2/6, equaling 5/6. So what we're solving now is for 5/6 of, or multiply, 240. Now it's a simple multiplication problem, right? Each of these is divisible by 6. So we have 5 over 1 times 40 over 1, or 200. 200 pieces of fruit are sold. To calculate how many pieces of fruit are left, we simply take our original amount, 240, and subtract the 200 sold for our remainder of 40. There's one last method that you can use as well. Let me show you that now. In method 3, we'll begin with the whole number, 240, and we'll individually find 1/2 and 1/3 of that number. So 1/2 of 240 would equal 120. 1/3 of 240 would equal 80. So 120 plus 80 equals 200, and that tells us the amount of fruit sold. Once again, we'll take the original amount of fruit, 240 pieces, minus 200 sold, to get answer B, 40 pieces are left. Let's use methods 1, 2, and 3 to work through a similar problem, just so you can see it all happen again. Kim has 48 plants in her garden. Of the 48 plants, 2/3 are carrots, and 1/4 are tomatoes. The rest of the plants are pumpkins. How many pumpkin plants are in her garden? So let's begin with method 1 and draw our bar model. Our first task is to find a common denominator so that we can write equivalent fractions for carrots, tomatoes, and pumpkins. Well, we don't know pumpkins yet. So what is the common denominator for 2/3 and 1/4? It'll be 12. So our new fractions will be 8/12 and 3/12. Now let's fill that in on our bar model. Okay, so there's our garden plot divided into 12 spots. So 8 of these spots are going to be carrots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 3 are going to be tomatoes. 1, 2, 3, leaving us with one final spot for pumpkins. So 1/12 of the plants in our garden are pumpkins. Piece of cake, right? However, the question didn't ask us what fraction of the plants are the pumpkins. It asked us how many pumpkin plants are there. So we need to go back and figure out if there are 12 units and 48 plants, how many plants are in each unit? Well, we'll divide each side by 12, giving us 1 unit equals 4 plants. Since there's 1 unit of pumpkins, there are 4 pumpkin plants. Done. Now let's go on to method 2 and see how that one works out for us. In method 2, we'll begin by setting up our problems in fraction form. So we have 2/3 carrots and 1/4 tomatoes. So we need to change these into equivalent fractions. So we'll rewrite these as 8/12 plus 3/12. That will give us the amount of plants in the garden that are not pumpkins, and that's 11/12. Okay? So we want to know how many plants are pumpkins, so we're going to take 12/12, our whole, and subtract 11/12 to get 1/12 remaining. Then to find out how many of those plants are pumpkins, we need to multiply it by the whole number of plants, which was 48 over 1. So both 48 and 12 are divisible by 12. We can rewrite that fraction as 1 over 1 times 4 over 1, giving us a final answer of, sorry, ran out of room, 4 pumpkins. Now let's try method 3. Remember, in method 3, we find the fractional part of the wholes and add them together. So we'll begin with 48 plants times 2/3 being carrots, and 48 plants times 1/4 being tomatoes. Let's start with 48 times 2/3. Both 48 and 3 are divisible by 3. So we'll rewrite these as, let's see, that's 16 times 2 over 1, or just plain old 16 times 2, giving us 32 plants that are carrots. Next, 48 times 1/4, both 48 and 4 are divisible by 4. So let's see, we have 12 times 1 over 1, or just plain 12. So we have 32 plus 12 plants equaling 44 plants that are either carrots or tomatoes. So if we want to know what's left over, we'll take 48 minus 44, giving us the 4 plants that are pumpkins. All right. Now we're going to move on to a new type of problem which asks us to find the fractional parts of a whole number and its remainder. Here's our problem. Sophia has $480. She uses 1/3 of the money to buy a winter coat, and then she spends 1/4 of the remainder. Oh, here come these problems again. 1/4 of the remainder on boots. How much money does she have left? There are two possible methods for solving this problem, and the first will have us use a bar model. We'll begin by drawing a bar that represents Sophia's total quantity of money, $480. She's going to spend 1/3 of it on a coat, so let's divide this into 3 equal parts. This is what she spends on the coat, and she has 2 parts remaining. She's going to spend 1/4 of the remainder on boots. So we're going to divide this into 4 parts now. Oh, don't forget, to keep our common denominator, we have to divide the 3rd part as well. Now, of the 4 parts remaining, 1 was spent on a coat. And what's left are these 3 pieces. So our model shows us that we have 6 units equaling $480. To find out the value of 1 unit, we need to divide each side by 6. So 1 unit of money is equivalent to $80. So how much money does she have left? She has 3 units times $80 left. Or 3 times 8 is 24. Add the 0 back on. She has $240 remaining. Now that we've worked through method 1, let me show you method 2 for solving this same problem. Once again, we begin with $480. We know that Sophia uses 1/3 of the money to buy a winter coat. So what is 1/3 of 480? Let's see, that will be $160, correct? So now we know that the coat cost $160. So after buying the coat, how much money does Sophia have left? Well, she has $480 minus $160 left, which equals $320. Okay? Sophia spent 1/4 of that $320 on a pair of boots. So now we can take 320 times 1/4 and get an answer of $80. So Sophia spent $80 on her boots. The question asks us, how much money does Sophia have left after purchasing her coat and her boots? So we're going to take our number here, 320, that was left over after purchasing the coat, and we're going to subtract the $80 that she spent on the boots to get an answer of $240. There's another way you could have solved this instead of taking 320 times 1/4 to get 80 and then subtracting that from 320. Can you think of what it might be? Correct. You could actually subtract the fractions first. If we treat 320 as a whole, 1, and subtract the 1/4 that is spent on the boots to get 3/4 as our remainder, we can then find 3/4 of 320 to solve for the amount of money that is left over. So let's see, 4 and 320 are both divisible by 4, giving us 3/1 times 80/1, or just 3 times 80, which is $240. So there, now we actually found 2 different ways to solve method 2. You can either subtract the fractions from the whole number first and then multiply, or you can multiply and then subtract the whole number from the whole number to get the remainder. Now I'm going to give you 3 practice problems to try on your own. I'm going to help you set up each one and ask you to do the calculation parts on your own. So here's number 1. Jan has 288 tickets to sell for a charity. She sells 2/9 of the tickets to her family and 1/3 of the tickets to her friends. Please solve for A, the number of tickets sold to both family and friends, And B, how many tickets are left? You may use any of the three methods introduced in the early parts of this video to solve this problem. If you work best in pictures, go ahead and use the bar model. If you prefer to use the numbers, you can use either of the multiplication methods, method 2 or method 3. Press pause while you work, and we'll come back to problem 2 in just a moment. And here is practice problem number 2. Maggie has $960. She spends 1/4 of her money on a mountain bike. And she then spends 1/6 of the remainder on clothing and accessories. She keeps the rest of the money. How much money does Maggie get to keep when she's all done buying her mountain bike and her clothing and accessories? Remember, in this case, you're finding 1/6 of the remainder after 1/4 is spent. Be careful, make sure you're using the correct fractions. Press pause while you work, and there'll be one final practice problem for you to try on your own this evening. And here's your third and final problem for tonight. Jeb took 1 hour and 40 minutes to finish a 3-lap road race. He took 1/4 of the total time to run lap 1, 1/3 of the remaining time for lap 2, and the rest of the time was used to run lap 3. How many minutes did he take to run the 3rd lap of the race? Don't be intimidated by the way this problem is set up. It's actually very similar to problem 2 with Maggie's money. You're going to start with a whole quantity. You're going to find out how much was used. You're going to find a fraction of the remainder and then simply have the what's left over as your answer for lap 3. Give it a try, and if you have trouble with it, don't worry, we'll go over this together as a class tomorrow. I'll see you then for more practice on word problems with multiplying and dividing fractions. See you then.